just missed. The bitter cold of Minneapolis. Minnesota's winter morning bit through every layer of clothing as Mark pulled into the dimly lit gas station at 5:30 a.m. He yawned, his breath forming frosty clouds in the frigid air, and rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. It was still dark, and the world outside was cloaked in an eerie silence that seemed to swallow all sound. Mark stumbled out of his car and began the mundane task of filling up his gas tank. His senses were dulled by the early hour, and he went through the motions mechanically. As he stood there, the biting cold gnawed at him, making him shiver despite his heavy coat. As Mark's eyes wandered, he noticed a figure approaching the gas station. The person was bundled up in layers, with a dark hoodie pulled tight around their face. The stranger moved with an odd, hurried gait and seemed to avoid making eye contact with anyone. Mark thought nothing of it, assuming it was just another early riser braving the cold. With the pump nozzle in place, Mark watched as the mysterious figure passed right by his pump without a second glance. They walked towards the gas station's entrance and disappeared inside. Mark finished fueling up, the numbing cold numbing his fingers, and then decided to head inside the store to grab a hot coffee to fend off the winter chill. As he approached the entrance, he noticed something unusual. The gas station's glass door was locked, and the open sign hung there, taunting him. He could see the interior lights on, and the faint murmur of voices from inside indicated that the employees were there. Mark pressed his face against the glass and knocked, trying to get their attention. To his surprise, the employees inside the store turned their heads and locked eyes with him. They looked terrified, as if they'd just seen a ghost. Mark motioned toward the door, miming that he wanted to come inside, but the employees shook their heads vigorously and mouthed something he couldn't quite hear. Panic gripped Mark as he realized something was terribly wrong. He knew he had to find out what was going on inside the gas station, but the employees refused to let him in. Desperation welled up inside him as he tried to make sense of the situation. Then, like a bolt of lightning, the truth hit him. The mysterious figure he had seen walking into the store just minutes ago had robbed it. The realization sent a chill down his spine, and he took a step back from the locked door, his heart pounding in his chest. Mark hurriedly retreated to his car, fumbling for his phone to call the police. He recounted what he had witnessed, desperately hoping they would arrive in time to apprehend the criminal. As he waited, he couldn't help but replay the events in his mind. If he had been just 2 minutes earlier, he would have been inside the gas station when the robbery occurred. The thought sent shivers down his spine, and he realized how narrowly he had escaped a potentially life-threatening situation. Hours later, after the police had come and gone, Mark sat in his car, still shaken by the close call. He had checked the news to confirm what he already knew. The headlines confirmed his worst fears. A robbery had taken place at the same gas station he had visited earlier that morning. Mark couldn't help but dwell on the unsettling thought that he had narrowly missed being caught in the crossfire of a violent crime. Fate had intervened, sparing him from what could have been a harrowing ordeal. As he pulled away from the gas station, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that the world was a precarious and unpredictable place. A shiver ran down his spine, and he whispered to himself, "Crazy world, I tell ya." The memory of that fateful morning would haunt him for a long time, a chilling reminder of how easily one's life could change in just a matter of minutes. Nope. It was a chilly, pre-dawn morning in Atlanta, Georgia. The city was still wrapped in darkness as James drove through the deserted streets, headed to the off-airport parking lot. He had an early flight to catch, scheduled to depart at 6 a.m., and he needed to make sure his car was parked securely before his journey. However, as he glanced at the fuel gauge, he realized that his car was running dangerously low on gas. Panic washed over him. He couldn't afford to get stranded on the way to the airport. He needed to refuel immediately. Fortunately, he spotted a dimly lit gas station not far from the airport, and with a sigh of relief, he pulled in. The gas station was eerily quiet, casting long shadows in the early morning darkness. A flickering fluorescent light above the pumps provided just enough illumination to make James feel uneasy. He glanced around and noticed 3 men sitting outside a convenience store, huddled together on a bench. Their faces were hidden in the shadows, and James couldn't make out any distinct features. As he stepped out of his car and approached the gas pump, a chill ran down his spine. He realized that there was something unsettling about the situation. The 3 men on the bench seemed to be engaged in hushed conversation, and they shot furtive glances in his direction. It was as if they were waiting for something. James tried to shake off his unease and focused on inserting his credit card into the pump. As he began to refuel, he couldn't help but feel that something was off. The silence was oppressive, and the only sound that reached his ears was the slow trickle of gasoline into his car's tank. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. The 3rd man, who had been sitting with the others, stood up abruptly and began walking toward him. His footsteps were slow and deliberate, each step echoing in the stillness of the early morning. James's heart raced as he realized just how vulnerable he was. He was alone at the poorly lit gas station, surrounded by strangers, and it was still too early for anyone else to be around. Panic welled up inside him, and he knew he had to get out of there. Without a second thought, James yanked the gas nozzle from his car, leaving it half-filled, and slammed the fuel cap shut. He jumped into the driver's seat, fumbling for his keys, his heart pounding in his chest. The stranger was now just a few feet away from him, his face obscured by the darkness. James slammed his foot on the gas pedal, and his car roared to life. In an instant, he peeled out of the gas station, leaving the 3 men behind. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. What had those men wanted? Why had they approached him? As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw the 3 figures standing in the middle of the empty gas station, watching him retreat. Their faces remained hidden in the shadows, their intentions unknown. James knew he had narrowly escaped a potentially dangerous situation, and a chilling realization washed over him. He was just minutes away from being in a vulnerable position, at the mercy of strangers in the dead of night. It was a horrifying thought that would haunt him for a long time to come. Nope, 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 he thought to himself, and he continued his journey to the airport, the unsettling encounter at the gas station forever etched in his memory. Very off person. The city of Los Angeles was sprawling with activity as the clock struck 11:00 p.m., but for Henry, the night shift attendant at a small, out-of-the-way gas station on the outskirts of town, the hours ahead promised solitude and the dull hum of fluorescent lights. His worn-out uniform clung to him, the sleeves of his jacket rolled up to accommodate the summer heat. Little did he know that this seemingly ordinary night would soon take a horrifying turn. The bell above the gas station's door jingled as a man entered. Henry glanced up from the newspaper he was reading behind the counter. The stranger, who looked to be in his mid-30s, wore a tattered leather jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His face was obscured by the cap's shadow, making it impossible for Henry to discern his features. But there was something about the man's demeanor, a certain tension in his movements, that immediately sent a shiver down Henry's spine. The man approached the counter with an eerie silence, his eyes fixed on the cigarettes behind the glass display. Without a word, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and slapped them onto the counter. Henry noted the distinct unease that gripped him. The man's gaze was cold, devoid of any hint of friendliness. It made Henry's skin crawl. "Pack of Marlboros," the man said in a low, raspy voice, his eyes never leaving Henry's. Henry, trying to maintain his composure, retrieved the cigarettes and rang up the purchase. He handed them to the stranger, who snatched them away without a word. The atmosphere in the gas station had grown uncomfortably tense, and Henry's heart raced as he watched the man leave, the bell above the door jingling once more. As the hours ticked away, Henry couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of his stomach. He kept glancing at the clock, willing the night to pass quickly. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty aisles. Around 2:00 a.m., the morning newspaper delivery arrived, and Henry grabbed a copy to pass the time. As he flipped through the pages, he froze when he reached the front page. His heart skipped a beat, and a cold sweat broke out on his brow. There, staring back at him from a grainy photograph, was the face of the man who had come into the gas station earlier. The headline read, "Gas Station Robber Strikes Again." The article detailed how the man had robbed a different gas station a few miles down the road, making off with cash and cigarettes. But what sent chills down Henry's spine was the next part of the story. The same man had proceeded to a nearby gas station, where he had brutally beaten one of the attendants almost to death, while her coworker cowered in the back room, too terrified to intervene. The gas station's security camera had captured the horrific attack, and the police were now on the hunt for the dangerous assailant. Henry's hands trembled as he realized the gravity of the situation. The man who had visited his gas station had a dark, violent streak. He had chosen to rob and assault innocent people, and Henry had come face to face with him, completely unaware of the danger that lurked beneath the man's cold exterior. The hours dragged on, and as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Henry's relief was palpable. The night had been long, filled with an unsettling encounter that would haunt him for years to come. He couldn't help but wonder about the many lives forever altered by the actions of one very off person who had walked through his gas station's door. "I noticed you stopped walking to work." The city of Portland, Oregon, was known for its lush greenery, eclectic culture, and the peculiar charm that its inhabitants brought to life. Among the many peculiarities, there was one constant in the city: the gas station down the road from Alice's house. It was the place where she had worked for years, her routine a mundane yet necessary part of her life. But little did she know that a seemingly innocuous encounter would soon spiral into a chilling mystery that would haunt her for nights to come. Alice was a 27-year-old woman who had always been accustomed to walking to work. It was a short stroll down the tree-lined streets, and she cherished the serenity of her morning walks. Her coworkers at the gas station often teased her about her habit, calling her the walking commuter. But Alice found solace in the rhythm of her steps. One day, as the clock struck 5:30 a.m., Alice embarked on her usual journey to work. The chilly morning air wrapped around her, and she pulled her coat tighter, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her steps echoed through the silent streets as she made her way to the gas station. As she arrived at the gas station, Alice noticed an older man sitting on a weathered bench just outside the store. He appeared to be in his 70s, with a haggard, wrinkled face and piercing, scrutinizing eyes that followed her every move. Alice couldn't help but feel a shiver crawl up her spine as she walked past him, and she quickened her pace, eager to escape his unnerving gaze. Days turned into weeks, and the strange old man became a fixture at the gas station. No matter the hour, he was there, sitting on the same bench, watching Alice as she came and went. His unrelenting gaze never wavered, and a sense of unease settled within her. Then, one fateful morning, as Alice arrived at work and began her usual routine, the old man did something that sent chills down her spine. He slowly rose from his seat, his frail form standing upright. His eyes locked onto Alice, and he shuffled towards her with a determined gait. Alice could feel her heart racing as he drew closer, and she braced herself for an encounter she had long dreaded. The old man stopped in front of her, his eyes boring into her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "I noticed you stopped walking to work," he said in a raspy voice that sounded like it had seen too many years. Alice was taken aback, her mind racing to comprehend the implications of his words. How did he know about her change in routine? It was a personal choice she had made without telling anyone. Panic welled up inside her as she realized that this stranger had been watching her every move. With a trembling voice, she replied, "Yes, I got a car." The old man simply nodded, his expression inscrutable. Then he turned and walked away, his steps slow and deliberate. Alice watched him go, a feeling of dread settling over her like a heavy cloud. What did his strange observation mean? And why had he been so fixated on her daily routine? From that day forward, Alice could not shake the eerie encounter from her mind. The old man continued to visit the gas station, but his silent observations took on a new level of intensity. She couldn't help but wonder what he knew, what secrets he held, and whether her decision to stop walking to work had unwittingly brought her into the orbit of something deeply unsettling. The days turned into weeks, and Alice's anxiety grew. She became obsessed with the old man's presence, trying to decipher the meaning behind his cryptic words. But no answers came, only more questions and an unshakable feeling that her life had taken a terrifying turn. And so, the chilling mystery of the old man at the gas station remained unsolved, leaving Alice with a sense of unease that would follow her long after the encounters had ceased. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, and the true nature of the old man's fixation on her would forever remain a haunting enigma. Just watching. The city of Chicago, Illinois, was known for its vibrant nightlife, but in the darkest hours of the night, it could take on a completely different character. Sarah, a young woman in her early 20s, worked at a gas station nestled on a quiet street in the outskirts of the city. She had grown accustomed to the strange characters that often visited the station during her third shift hours. One particularly chilly night, Sarah sat behind the service window, her eyes glued to the surveillance monitors. The service window was a necessity during late-night shifts, keeping the store closed to walk-ins while allowing customers to make their purchases through a secure barrier. It was meant to deter unsavory characters, but sometimes it only added to the unsettling atmosphere. It was around 3 a.m. when Sarah noticed a man lingering at one of the gas pumps. He stood there, motionless, for what felt like an eternity, his gaze fixed on the gas station. Sarah couldn't help but feel a shiver crawl up her spine as she watched him on the monitor. 10 long minutes passed, and the man finally made his way to the service window. He was a tall figure, his features obscured by the shadows cast by the dimly lit gas station. Sarah's heart began to race as the man approached, her instincts telling her that something was off about him. He leaned in closer to the service window and spoke, his voice low and unnerving. "Can you let me in?" he asked, his eyes locked onto Sarah's. Sarah, trying to maintain her composure, responded, "I can't let anyone in until 6 a.m. when first shift arrives. It's store policy." The man's gaze didn't waver, and he leaned in even closer, his breath fogging up the glass. "What are you so scared of?" he asked, his voice taking on an eerie tone. "I just need to use the bathroom." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she pointed to the surveillance cameras. "It's not worth my job to let someone in at this hour," she explained, her voice trembling. The man let out a sinister chuckle, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. "I was just joking," he said, his tone shifting back to normal. He turned away from the service window and walked back to his car, where he stood for another 5 minutes, his gaze fixated on the gas station. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her. The man's behavior had been deeply unsettling, and she couldn't understand why he had been so insistent about coming inside the gas station. What had he meant when he asked, "What are you so scared of?" And why had he stared at the station for so long before approaching? As the minutes dragged on, Sarah continued to watch the man on the surveillance cameras, her heart racing with each passing moment. The eerie encounter had left her with more questions than answers, and she couldn't help but wonder about the true intentions of the man who had been just watching in the dead of night. The night shift continued, and the man eventually got back into his car and drove away. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief as the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon. The gas station, once shrouded in darkness, was now bathed in the soft glow of morning. As her shift came to an end, Sarah couldn't help but feel that she had narrowly avoided a sinister encounter. The memory of the man's unsettling presence would stay with her for a long time, a chilling reminder that sometimes the darkest hours of the night could bring the most unexpected and unsettling experiences. Man staring through the window. The night was pitch black as Jessica settled into her routine at the deserted gas station on the outskirts of Baltimore, Maryland. For nearly 7 years, she had worked the night shift, a solitary existence where the only companions were the flickering fluorescent lights and the occasional hum of passing cars. The station's doors remained locked at all times during her shift, and hardly anyone came by for gas in the dead of night. It was a mundane, albeit lonely, existence that she had grown accustomed to. On this particular night, the air was still, and the silence was punctuated only by the soft tapping of Jessica's fingers on the keyboard as she worked on some homework. The monotonous rhythm of the task helped her pass the time as she waited for the clock to tick closer to dawn. Around 3:30 a.m., the tranquility of the night was abruptly shattered. The sound of a motorized scooter echoed through the empty streets outside. Jessica glanced up from her work, her eyes fixated on the surveillance monitors. The scooter moved steadily along the sidewalk, drawing nearer to the gas station. As the scooter passed by for the first time, Jessica barely registered it as anything out of the ordinary. But when it circled back, heading in the opposite direction, her unease began to grow. The rider's actions were becoming increasingly unsettling. The scooter came to a sudden halt just outside the gas station, and the rider, a man, dismounted. Jessica watched on the monitor, her heart beginning to race. At 21 years old, she was petite and young-looking, and the solitary nature of her job made her feel vulnerable, especially in the dead of night. The man on the scooter jolted suddenly, his head snapping up as if he had suddenly noticed something. His face was as pale as the moon, and his bulging eyes never left the gas station. He mounted his scooter again, and slowly, deliberately, rode closer to the service window. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as she watched the man's eerie approach. His face remained unchanged, a blank, vacant stare that sent a chill down her spine. The man reached the locked doors of the gas station, his scooter engine sputtering to a halt. With the gas station's interior illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights, Jessica felt exposed, like a prey animal in the sight of a predator. The man dismounted his scooter once more and began to march purposefully toward the locked doors. His gaze never wavered, and his face betrayed no emotion. Jessica's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the man draw nearer, his steps echoing in the stillness of the night. He stopped just inches from the glass doors, the blank stare fixed squarely on her. For what felt like an eternity, he stood there, unmoving, unmoved. Then, as if driven by an unseen force, the man reached out and pulled on the locked doors, his movements mechanical and unrelenting. He tugged on the doors repeatedly, as if expecting them to yield to his will. Panic welled up inside Jessica as she watched him, her mind racing for a way to escape the impending nightmare. In a surreal twist, the man's blank stare seemed to transform into a grotesque smile. His eyes bore into Jessica's, and a cold, sinister laugh emanated from his lips. The sound sent shivers coursing through her body, and the man continued to pound on the door with a manic intensity. Unable to bear the terror any longer, Jessica abandoned her post and rushed into the back room, desperate to hide from the relentless stranger outside. Her heart raced, and her breath came in frantic gasps as she huddled in the darkness, listening to the ominous sounds echoing from the front of the gas station. Minutes turned into hours as Jessica waited in terrified silence. Finally, the noises outside ceased, and an eerie calm settled over the gas station once more. She cautiously emerged from her hiding place, her mind still reeling from the encounter. The man on the scooter was gone, leaving behind only the unsettling memory of his blank stare and manic laughter. Jessica couldn't explain his bizarre behavior, and the events of that night would haunt her for a long time to come. The gas station, once a place of solitude, had become a nightmarish stage for a terrifying encounter that defied explanation. And as Jessica gazed out at the empty streets bathed in the soft glow of dawn, she couldn't help but wonder if the man on the scooter had been driven by something far more sinister than mere curiosity. Creepy mask. The night air in Detroit, Michigan, hung heavy and still as Jenny, a young woman of 23, went about her nightly routine at the gas station in a semi-rough part of town. The station was located in a neighborhood that had seen better days, and the late hours of her shift often brought a sense of unease, especially when she was alone. At precisely 10:00 p.m., she activated the magnetic lock on the station's glass door. The rule was clear. In order to enter the gas station, a customer's face must be visible. It was a safety precaution meant to deter potential troublemakers. As the night pressed on, Jenny found herself engrossed in her work, cutting and wrapping cinnamon rolls behind the counter. The quiet hum of the refrigerators and the distant rumble of traffic were the only sounds that broke the silence. Around 1:00 a.m., as she meticulously wrapped another roll, she noticed a customer approaching the station. The figure was cloaked in darkness, with the hood of their jacket pulled up, obscuring their features. The person walked with a deliberate pace, head down, and hands tucked deep into the pockets of the hoodie. As the stranger reached the glass door, Jenny's heart began to race. The person tugged at the handle, but the magnetic lock held firm. With a sense of dread, Jenny looked up from her task and locked eyes with the intruder. What she saw sent a shiver down her spine. Over the stranger's face was a white cloth, eerily reminiscent of a mask, with 2 crude eye holes cut out and red paint smeared around the edges. The mask obscured the person's identity entirely, revealing only their piercing gaze. The stranger stood motionless, staring at Jenny with an unsettling intensity. Fear gripped Jenny as she fumbled to pick up the phone and dial 911. She kept her eyes fixed on the intruder, who remained unnervingly still. The seconds stretched into minutes as she whispered her urgent plea for help to the dispatcher on the other end of the line. The stranger's silent vigil continued, their eyes locked onto Jenny's, unblinking and unwavering. The atmosphere in the gas station became oppressive, and a sense of impending danger weighed heavily on Jenny's shoulders. Then, without warning, the stranger raised a hand, still clad in the hoodie's pocket, and gave a slow, deliberate wave. The mask remained a grotesque fixture on their face, and the silence hung in the air like a thick fog. Finally, the stranger turned away from the door and began to walk away. Jenny watched, her breath coming in ragged gasps, as the intruder's form retreated into the darkness of the night. She stayed on the line with the police, recounting the chilling encounter and hoping that they would catch up to the masked figure. As the minutes passed, the distant sound of sirens grew closer, and the red and blue lights of a police car bathed the gas station in an eerie glow. Jenny's heart continued to race as she waited for the officers to arrive, unsure if they would catch up to the mysterious intruder or if the night would remain shrouded in uncertainty. The encounter with the person wearing the creepy mask would forever haunt Jenny, a chilling reminder of the unsettling incidents that could occur during the quietest hours of the night. As the police took her statement and combed the area for any signs of the stranger, she couldn't help but wonder about the motivations and intentions of the masked figure who had stared at her for what felt like an eternity before disappearing into the shadows. Don't worry, it's not my blood. In the heart of Los Angeles, California, the city of angels, there was a gas station that operated 24 hours a day. The station was nestled on a dimly lit street in a quiet part of town, but the night shift workers knew that appearances could be deceiving. In a city known for its glamour and dreams, they were accustomed to the darker side of reality. On this particular night, Sarah, a 28-year-old gas station attendant, was manning the counter. She had grown used to the solitary routine that came with her late-night shifts, and the flickering fluorescent lights overhead provided an eerie backdrop to her nightly duties. It was well past midnight when a figure stumbled through the station's glass door. The stranger's clothes were splattered with crimson, and blood covered his hands and face. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening in shock. The man appeared disheveled, his eyes wide with a wild and vacant look. His face was smeared with blood, and he had a strange, unsettling smile plastered across his lips. He walked with an unsteady gait, leaving bloody footprints in his wake. Despite the horrific sight before her, Sarah quickly composed herself, her instincts kicking in. She had seen her fair share of strange characters over the years, but this was something else entirely. The man approached the counter, his eyes locked onto hers, and he didn't seem the least bit concerned about the blood that covered him. In a voice that was almost too calm for the situation, Sarah greeted him. "Hello, sir. Can I help you with something?" The man's response was chilling. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached for a candy bar and a cup of coffee from the shelves behind the counter. His hands were caked with dried blood, and the blood on his face seemed to have coagulated into a grotesque mask. He placed the items on the counter, and with a dazed expression, he reached into his pocket and pulled out some crumpled bills. Sarah watched in disbelief as the man counted out the exact change for his purchases. His movements were strangely mechanical, as if he were operating on autopilot. He placed the money on the counter and turned his gaze back to Sarah. "Don't worry," he muttered in a low, monotone voice, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's not my blood." Sarah's heart raced as she processed his words. The man's eerie assurance sent a chill down her spine. The implication of his statement hung heavily in the air, leaving her with more questions than answers. Who did the blood belong to? And why was he so eerily calm about it? Without another word, the man picked up his coffee and candy bar and turned to leave. He left the station, the jingling of the bell above the door fading into the distance. As the man disappeared into the night, Sarah was left standing behind the counter, her mind racing. The gas station had seen its fair share of bizarre encounters, but this one had shaken her to the core. The blood-covered stranger, with his cryptic words and vacant eyes, had left an indelible mark on her memory. The hours passed, and the night grew quiet once more. The fluorescent lights continued to flicker overhead, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty aisles. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed something inexplicable and deeply unsettling. The gas station, once a place of routine and monotony, had become a haunting memory that would forever be etched in Sarah's mind. The mystery of the blood-covered stranger would remain unsolved, a chilling reminder of the strange and unsettling encounters that could occur in the darkest hours of the night. Haunted Store. In the bustling city of New Orleans, known for its vibrant culture and rich history, there was a convenience store tucked away on a quiet street. It was an unassuming place, but to the employees who worked there, it held a secret that cast a shadow over their everyday lives. On this particular day, Emily, a young woman in her 20s, was tasked with the day shift at the convenience store. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the shelves lined with snacks and household essentials. As she went about her duties, she couldn't help but feel the familiar sense of unease that lingered in the air. Emily had heard the rumors from her coworkers. They whispered about strange occurrences, unexplained sounds, and eerie sensations that had haunted the store for years. Some even claimed to have seen apparitions or felt a ghostly presence late at night. Emily had always been skeptical, chalking it up to overactive imaginations or the quirks of an old building. As the day wore on, Emily found herself front-facing products, her movements automatic and efficient. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed her coworker, Lisa, emerging from the back room. Lisa was a familiar face, and they had worked together for months, forming a bond over shared shifts and inside jokes. Emily turned to greet Lisa, her voice trailing off as she saw her coworker's back. She was certain it was Lisa. She recognized her uniform and her distinctive ponytail. Emily's eyes remained locked on Lisa's figure as she rounded the corner and made her way toward the register area. "Lisa," Emily called out, a warm smile spreading across her face, but there was no response. The figure continued to move, and Emily followed it, her footsteps echoing through the quiet store. As Emily reached the register area, her confusion deepened. The figure that had looked so much like Lisa had vanished. There was no one there, and the eerie silence of the store enveloped her. Perplexed and unnerved, Emily called out for Lisa, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "Lisa, are you there?" A response came from across the small store near the restrooms. It was Lisa's voice, clear and unmistakable. "I'm over here," she called back. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She turned and saw Lisa standing at the complete opposite side of the store, next to the restroom doors. Lisa had been there the whole time, and it was impossible for her to have been at the register area just moments ago. A chill ran down Emily's spine as she realized the gravity of what had just transpired. She had seen a figure that looked exactly like her coworker, moving with the same mannerisms, and yet it had vanished into thin air. The store's haunted reputation suddenly seemed more plausible than ever. As the day shift continued, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. The convenience store, once a place of routine and familiarity, had become a place of mystery and uncertainty. The strange encounter with the ghostly doppelganger of her coworker was a reminder that some secrets are hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered by those who dare to believe in the unexplained. The devil has his hands on you. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood in Concord, New Hampshire, there stood a gas station that seemed untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The station sat under a canopy of trees, and the dim glow of its neon signs painted a tranquil picture against the night sky. For the most part, the late-night shift was uneventful, with customers coming and going in a steady stream. But one fateful night, everything changed. Inside the station, a young woman named Lily manned the counter. She had been working there for years, and the routine had become second nature. The night air was cool, and the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead filled the space with a gentle buzz. As the clock neared closing time, Lily began to tidy up, making sure everything was in its proper place. It was a typical night, just like any other. But little did she know that this night would be etched into her memory forever. The bell above the door chimed softly as a customer entered. Lily looked up and saw a small elderly man standing before her. He was dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt, his frail frame belying the strength that seemed to emanate from him. His eyes held a depth of knowledge and experience that was far beyond what his aged appearance suggested. With a polite smile, Lily greeted him. "Good evening, sir. How can I assist you tonight?" The old man's response sent an unexpected chill down Lily's spine. He leaned in closer, his hand trembling as it reached out to grasp her wrist. His grip was surprisingly firm, and his fingers felt cold, like ice against her skin. The old man's eyes locked onto Lily's, and the intensity of his gaze made her uncomfortable. It was as though he could see into her very soul. In a low, deliberate voice, he spoke words that would haunt her for the rest of her days. "Hell is a real place," he began, his voice carrying an eerie weight. "And the devil has already got his hand on you, girl. Be careful." The word hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Lily's heart raced, and her mind swirled with confusion and fear. She tried to pull her wrist away, but the old man's grip remained steadfast, his eyes boring into hers. She stammered, "What do you mean? Who are you?" But the old man only continued to stare, his eyes filled with an unsettling mix of sorrow and mourning. It felt as though he held knowledge of a world beyond the ordinary, a realm where the lines between the living and the dead blurred. As quickly as he had arrived, the old man released his grip and turned to leave. The chill in the air seemed to intensify, and Lily shivered as she watched him go. The bell above the door chimed once more, and the old man disappeared into the night. For hours after his departure, Lily sat in the dimly lit gas station, her thoughts consumed by the cryptic message she had received. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had encountered something otherworldly, something that transcended the boundaries of reality. As the night wore on, Lily couldn't help but wonder about the old man's words. What did he mean by "the devil has his hand on you"? And what knowledge did he possess about the existence of hell? The gas station, once a place of familiarity and routine, had become a realm of uncertainty and fear. The encounter with the enigmatic stranger had left Lily with more questions than answers, and she couldn't escape the haunting feeling that her life had been touched by forces beyond her comprehension. And as the first light of dawn broke over the quiet streets of Concord, New Hampshire, Lily knew that some mysteries were destined to remain unsolved, leaving her with a lingering sense of unease and the unsettling belief that the devil had left his mark on her soul. Got away safe. The city of Los Angeles sprawled under the cover of darkness, its labyrinthine streets illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. It was a city that never slept, where the promise of excitement and adventure lay around every corner. But for Jake, a young man in his early 20s, the night held something much more sinister than he could have ever imagined. Jake had just finished his shift at a small convenience store nestled at the intersection of two busy streets. The gas station across the road had always been a constant backdrop to his daily routine. He had grown accustomed to the late-night hustle and bustle of the city, where the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary often blurred. On this particular night, as Jake stepped out of the convenience store, the air was crisp and filled with the scent of gasoline. He pulled his jacket tight around him, his breath forming misty clouds in the chilly night. The familiar hum of traffic and distant sirens filled the air, lulling him into a sense of familiarity. But as he made his way across the road, everything changed in an instant. The tranquil night was shattered by the sudden arrival of a half-dozen police cars, their sirens blaring and lights flashing wildly. Panic surged through Jake as he watched the scene unfold before him. The police cars screeched to a halt in front of the gas station, their doors swinging open to reveal officers clad in dark uniforms, their weapons drawn and faces filled with determination. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that something had gone terribly wrong. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone and dialed 911, the urgency of the situation washing over him. He watched in horror as the officers rushed into the gas station, their voices raised in commands and urgency. It didn't take long for the truth to emerge. The gas station had been the target of a violent robbery, and the cashier had been shot in the chaos. The realization hit Jake like a sledgehammer. It could have easily been him on the other side of that counter, staring down the barrel of a gun. As he recounted the events to the 911 operator, a sense of gratitude washed over him. He had narrowly escaped a fate that had befallen another. The gas station across the road had been the scene of a nightmare, a place where the ordinary had been transformed into a living hell. The minutes dragged on, and the police officers worked tirelessly to secure the scene and gather evidence. Jake could only watch, his heart heavy with a mixture of relief and sorrow. He knew that his life had been spared by mere chance, by the twist of fate that had placed him on the other side of the road that night. As the first light of dawn began to break over the city, Jake couldn't help but reflect on the fragility of life and the randomness of fate. The gas station, once a place of convenience and routine, had become a stark reminder of the unpredictability of the world. With a heavy heart, Jake turned away from the scene and made his way home, his thoughts consumed by the events of the night. He knew that he had gotten away safe, but the memory of the robbery and the gunshot that had echoed through the gas station would linger with him, a chilling reminder of the night when his life had hung in the balance. Double chaos. In the heart of Chicago, the city that never slept, there stood a gas station that had seen its fair share of bizarre and unsettling incidents over the years. Nestled amidst the urban sprawl, it was a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary often collided, leaving those who worked there with stories that defied explanation. But one fateful night, two events would unfold that would defy all reason and plunge the gas station into a world of chaos and uncertainty. The gas station was a haven for the night owls and insomniacs of the city, a place where they could fuel up their cars and satisfy their midnight cravings. It was also the workplace of Alex, a young man in his early 30s who had grown accustomed to the strange and unusual. On this particular night, the neon signs bathed the gas station in an eerie, otherworldly glow. The air was filled with the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chirping of crickets. Alex had just finished helping a customer when a woman entered the store. She was an enigmatic figure, her appearance striking and unconventional. Her hair was a wild tangle of curls, and her clothing was a mismatch of colors and patterns. But what drew Alex's attention the most was her piercing gaze, a gaze that seemed to see far beyond the mundane. With a bemused smile, the woman approached the counter. "You're half angel, you know," she declared with an air of certainty that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. Taken aback, Alex raised an eyebrow. "Half angel? That's a new one. What do you mean?" The woman's response was cryptic, her words shrouded in mystery. "You may look like a demon, but you have the heart of an angel. Be careful, young one, for the darkness that surrounds you seeks to extinguish your light." Before Alex could respond or even process the woman's bizarre statement, she turned and made her way toward the restroom at the back of the store. The restroom had no windows, and there was no way for her to slip out unnoticed. But when Alex went to check on her moments later, she had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a lingering sense of unease. As he grappled with the unsettling encounter, chaos erupted once more, this time in the form of a man who had entered the gas station. The man's demeanor was erratic and volatile, his eyes filled with a manic intensity. He approached the cash register area, a determined glint in his eye. In one hand, he clutched a bottle of lighter fluid, and in the other, a stove lighter. Panic surged through Alex as he realized the man's intentions. With a voice trembling with fear, Alex shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" But the man paid no heed. He poured the lighter fluid onto the cash register area and the cigarette case, dousing them in a volatile cocktail of flammable liquid. Then, with a swift and deliberate motion, he flicked the stove lighter to life and brought it dangerously close to the soaked surface. The air was thick with tension as Alex watched in horror, his heart pounding in his chest. The man's eyes burned with a manic fervor as he attempted to set the gas station ablaze. It was a surreal and terrifying moment, a nightmare brought to life in the heart of the city. As the seconds ticked by, the unthinkable happened. The stove lighter failed to ignite the volatile mixture of lighter fluid, and the man's frenzied attempts proved futile. The gas station remained unscathed, a testament to the bizarre turn of events. With a sense of defeat, the man finally dropped the lighter and fled the scene, disappearing into the night just as mysteriously as he had arrived. Alex was left standing amidst the chaos, his heart still racing, and his mind reeling from the double dose of strangeness that had unfolded before him. The gas station, once a place of routine and familiarity, had become a realm of uncertainty and unpredictability. As he surveyed the gas station, still intact despite the man's best efforts, Alex couldn't help but wonder about the cryptic words of the woman who had vanished into thin air. "You may look like a demon, but you have the heart of an angel." The words echoed in his mind, a riddle that defied explanation. And as the night wore on, the neon signs continued to flicker, casting an eerie glow over the gas station. Alex knew that he had witnessed something beyond the realm of the ordinary, something that would forever remain a mystery, leaving him with a sense of unease and the unsettling belief that the darkness that surrounded him was not yet finished with its cryptic games. Suspiciously purchased gas. In the quiet, unassuming town of Springfield, nestled in the heart of Ohio, there was a convenience store that stood as a beacon of normalcy amidst the serenity of suburban life. It was the kind of place where the regular customers knew each other by name, and the daily routine of buying groceries and snacks took on a comforting rhythm. But one fateful day, an innocuous purchase of a gallon of gas would lead to a chain of events that would unravel the town's peace and plunge it into a web of mystery and intrigue. Behind the counter of the convenience store stood Sarah, a woman in her early 40s who had spent the better part of her life serving the townsfolk with a friendly smile and a welcoming demeanor. Her days were filled with the hum of the cash register, the chime of the doorbell as customers entered, and the cheerful banter of familiar faces. On a crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves outside turned shades of red and gold, a customer entered the store. He was a man in his mid-30s, his features unremarkable at first glance. He approached the counter with a gallon container in hand and a sense of urgency in his demeanor. With a polite nod, the man placed the gallon container on the counter and spoke in a hushed tone. "I need a gallon of gas, please." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Her curiosity piqued. It was unusual for someone to purchase such a small quantity of gas, especially without a vehicle nearby. But she thought nothing more of it and proceeded to fill the container. As she worked, she couldn't help but steal a few glances at the man. He appeared nervous, his eyes darting around the store as though expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. It was an odd behavior that left Sarah with a nagging sense of unease. Once the container was filled, the man paid in cash and hastily made his exit, leaving Sarah with a lingering feeling of discomfort. She watched as he climbed into an old beat-up sedan parked a short distance away and sped off, leaving a trail of questions in his wake. Days passed, and Sarah went about her routine, serving customers and engaging in friendly conversations. But the memory of the man who had purchased the gallon of gas continued to nag at her. It was as though a shadow had been cast over the tranquility of the town. Then, one fateful evening, Sarah's worst fears were realized. She turned on the local news to witness a horrifying sight. A house in the nearby neighborhood was engulfed in flames, the inferno consuming everything in its path. The news anchor reported that the fire had claimed the lives of several people and left a trail of devastation in its wake. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the connection between the man and the gallon of gas he had purchased from her store. It was a chilling revelation, one that sent shivers down her spine. She knew she had to act, to do whatever it took to help the authorities find the man who had set the fire. She immediately contacted the local detectives and provided them with an accurate description of the man and his vehicle. Her detailed account would prove invaluable in the investigation that followed. Weeks turned into months, and the town of Springfield was gripped by a sense of fear and uncertainty. But the authorities, armed with Sarah's information, worked tirelessly to track down the man who had set the devastating fire. Their efforts would eventually lead to his capture, and he would face the consequences of his actions. The man was convicted and sentenced to prison, where he would spend the next 30 years paying for the lives he had taken and the havoc he had wreaked. As the years passed, the town of Springfield slowly healed from the scars of that fateful day. Sarah returned to her role at the convenience store, her dedication to her community unwavering. The memory of the man and the gallon of gas had faded into the past, a haunting reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the most unexpected places. And as the sun set over the quiet town of Springfield, life continued to move forward, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of individuals like Sarah, who, in their own small ways, could make a difference in the face of darkness. Someone hiding in the bathroom. In the heart of a remote town in the United States, nestled between rolling hills and surrounded by dense forests, there stood a gas station that served as the lifeblood of the community. For years, this gas station had been a haven for the weary travelers passing through, as well as a gathering place for the town's residents. One particularly quiet night, a young woman named Emily settled into her usual spot behind the counter. It was the graveyard shift, and the clock had just struck 7 p.m. Her coworker had left shortly after she had started, leaving her alone in the dimly lit store. Emily had worked at the gas station for many years and had grown accustomed to the solitude of the night shift. It was a time when the world seemed to slow down, and the stillness of the night enveloped her. She often took advantage of the quiet hours to catch up on her reading, or simply sit in contemplation. As the hours passed, Emily's eyelids began to droop, and the monotony of the night threatened to lull her into a deep slumber. The store's fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow over the empty aisles, and the hum of the refrigerators provided a soothing backdrop. But just as Emily was about to succumb to the drowsiness that had overtaken her, the tranquility of the night was shattered by a sudden and unexpected commotion. From the corner of her eye, she caught a flash of movement, and her heart skipped a beat. A figure, wild-eyed and disheveled, burst out of the customer washroom with a frenzied urgency. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his chest heaved as though he had been running for his life. He stumbled forward, crashing into a display of snacks before steadying himself. Emily's eyes widened in shock as she took in the sight of the disoriented man before her. She had been alone in the store for hours, and no customers had come through the doors during her shift. The sudden appearance of this stranger left her baffled and alarmed. For a moment, Emily and the man locked eyes, their gazes filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. Time seemed to stand still as they assessed each other, neither quite sure how to proceed. Then, with a surge of adrenaline, the man bolted toward the exit, his footsteps echoing loudly in the otherwise silent store. The door swung open with a jingle, and he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a trail of questions and bewilderment. Emily was left stunned, her heart racing, and her mind filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. How had the man ended up in the customer washroom without her noticing? She had been at the counter for hours, and no one had entered the store during that time. It was as though he had materialized out of thin air. The eerie encounter left Emily with an unsettling feeling that lingered long after the man's hasty departure. She couldn't shake the sense that something inexplicable had occurred that night, something beyond the realm of understanding. As the hours ticked by, Emily continued to work her shift, her mind consumed by the mystery of the man who had seemingly emerged from nowhere. The gas station, once a place of solitude and routine, had become a source of intrigue and uncertainty. And as the first light of dawn broke over the town, Emily knew that some secrets were destined to remain hidden, leaving her with a sense of unease and the unsettling belief that the night held mysteries that defied explanation. Lifesaving Dream. In the heart of a bustling city in the United States, there stood a small convenience store, an unassuming beacon of light amidst the chaos of the urban landscape. The store had its share of late-night patrons and weary travelers, seeking solace in the glow of its fluorescent lights and the promise of a warm meal. For Emily, a young woman in her 20s, the convenience store had become a familiar second home. Emily had recently taken on the role of the night shift cashier, a position that required her to work alone through the quiet, often eerie hours of the night. Her coworkers had warned her about the challenges of the late shift, the solitude, and the occasional odd encounter with nocturnal visitors. Still, she had embraced the job with the hope of earning some extra income while navigating the demands of college life. As Emily settled into her new routine, she quickly adapted to the quiet of the night, finding solace in the rhythm of her tasks. The hum of the refrigerators and the occasional chime of the doorbell provided a soothing backdrop to her nightly duties. However, as time passed, she couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that crept over her during the late hours. One night, while Emily was stocking the shelves with snacks and beverages, she overheard a conversation between her coworkers in the break room. They spoke in hushed tones, discussing the recent riots that had erupted in a nearby neighborhood. The news was filled with reports of unrest and chaos, leaving the city on edge. As Emily listened to the grim accounts of the riots, a sense of unease settled over her. She couldn't help but wonder if the turbulence in the nearby area would spill over into her peaceful corner of the city. She brushed off the thought as irrational and continued with her work, determined not to let fear dictate her actions. But as the days passed and the tension in the city mounted, Emily's apprehension grew. The late-night shifts had begun to take a toll on her, leaving her exhausted and vulnerable to the lingering sense of dread that plagued her thoughts. Then, one fateful night, Emily experienced a dream so vivid and unsettling that it would change the course of her life. In her dream, She found herself behind the convenience store's counter, going about her duties just as she did every night. But as the minutes ticked by, a shadowy figure entered the store, concealed by a hoodie and a mask. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the figure approached the counter, a glint of menace in their eyes. With a trembling voice, they demanded money from the cash register, a gun concealed beneath their clothing. Fear coursed through Emily's veins as she complied with their demands, her hand shaking as she handed over the money. The dream felt agonizingly real, each moment etched into her memory with a terrifying clarity. But just as the figure made their exit, they turned to Emily and issued a chilling threat. "Don't you dare call the police," they hissed, their voice a sinister whisper. Emily awoke in a cold sweat, her heart racing, and her mind consumed by the haunting vision of the dream. It had felt so real, so vivid, that she couldn't shake the feeling that it was a premonition of the danger that awaited her on the night shift. Determined to heed the warning of her dream, Emily approached her manager the next day, her voice trembling as she recounted the unsettling vision. She requested to be taken off the night shift, explaining her fear of a potential robbery or violence. Her manager, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to her request and reassigned her to daytime shifts. Emily felt a profound sense of relief, grateful for the opportunity to escape the late-night shifts that had weighed on her like a heavy burden. 2 weeks passed, and Emily settled into her new routine, free from the anxiety and dread that had plagued her on the night shift. She couldn't help but wonder if her dream had been a mere product of her imagination, a manifestation of her fears and anxieties. Then, one fateful night, Emily received a call from her former coworkers. The convenience store had been robbed, just as she had dreamed. A masked figure had entered the store, demanded money at gunpoint, and made a hasty exit, leaving the staff shaken and terrified. As Emily listened to the details of the robbery, she couldn't help but feel a shiver of gratitude for the dream that had saved her from a potentially life-threatening situation. She had followed her instincts, heeded the warning of her subconscious, and escaped the danger that had befallen her former colleagues. The events of that night left Emily with a profound sense of awe and wonder at the mysteries of the human mind. Her dream had been a life-saving premonition, a beacon of light in the darkness of uncertainty. She couldn't explain the source of her vision, but she knew that it had spared her from a fate that could have been far more sinister. And as Emily continued her journey through life, she carried with her the knowledge that sometimes the most inexplicable and unsettling experiences could be the ones that ultimately saved us from harm, guiding us through the darkest of nights and into the safety of the dawn. Climbing into the coolers. In the heart of a bustling city in the United States, there was a convenience store unlike any other. Located on a corner known for its late-night traffic and eclectic mix of patrons, this store had seen its fair share of odd encounters and bizarre incidents over the years. But one particular night would forever stand out in the memories of those who witnessed it. The store was a small, dimly lit oasis amidst the cacophony of the city's streets. Its fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow on the rows of snacks, beverages, and refrigerators lining the narrow aisles. It was a place where the late-night wanderers sought refuge, their reasons as varied as the products on the shelves. Behind the counter stood Lisa, a young woman with a penchant for observing the peculiarities of life that unfolded within the store's walls. Lisa had worked at the convenience store for several years, and she had become something of an unofficial chronicler of the odd and unexpected moments that occurred during the late-night shifts. On one unassuming night, as the clock struck midnight, Lisa settled into her routine behind the counter. The store was alive with activity as a steady stream of customers flowed in and out, their footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. The cash register hummed with the sound of transactions, and the doorbell chimed with each new arrival. As the night wore on, Lisa couldn't help but notice a man who stood out from the rest. He was a tall figure, his features obscured by a hooded sweatshirt and a pair of dark sunglasses, despite the late hour. His behavior, however, was what set him apart from the other patrons. The man wandered through the store with an air of aimlessness, his eyes darting around as though he were searching for something. He moved from aisle to aisle, his footsteps tentative and hesitant. Lisa watched him from behind the counter, her curiosity piqued by his unusual demeanor. But it was what happened next that would leave an indelible mark on Lisa's memory. As the man approached the refrigerators at the back of the store, he came to a sudden halt. Without warning, he opened the glass door of one of the coolers, revealing rows of chilled beverages and sodas. What happened next defied all logic and reason. The man, in a bizarre and bewildering act, attempted to climb into the cooler. He squeezed his body through the narrow opening, contorting himself in a futile attempt to fit into the shelves of soda. It was a surreal sight, as though he were trying to disappear into the cold confines of the cooler. Lisa's eyes widened in disbelief as she watched the man's absurd efforts. She couldn't comprehend the motive behind his actions, and the other customers in the store stood frozen, their gazes locked on the spectacle unfolding before them. As the man struggled to fit into the cooler, his limbs flailing in all directions, Lisa took action. She rushed forward, her voice stern but tinged with concern. "Sir, you can't do that. Get out of there," she exclaimed, her words echoing through the store. With a final, futile attempt, the man withdrew from the cooler, his clothing damp from the chilled beverages that surrounded him. He staggered backward, his sunglasses askew and his hood falling back to reveal a disheveled appearance. Lisa, her patience wearing thin, demanded an explanation for his inexplicable behavior. But the man remained silent, his eyes locked onto some distant point as though he were in a trance. It was as if he had been pulled into a world of his own, a realm of confusion and bewilderment. Unable to make sense of the situation, Lisa called the police, who arrived shortly thereafter to assess the man's condition. It was clear that something had driven him to such an unusual and irrational act, but the answers remained elusive. As the police questioned the man and conducted their investigation, the store slowly returned to its usual state of quietude. The other customers resumed their shopping, and the late-night shift carried on, though the memory of the man who had tried to climb into the coolers would linger in their minds for years to come. In the end, the incident remained a mystery, an inexplicable anomaly that defied explanation. The man's motives, his state of mind, and the strange compulsion that had led him to attempt such an absurd act would forever remain unanswered questions. And as Lisa resumed her role behind the counter, watching the late-night patrons come and go, she couldn't help but wonder about the depths of the human psyche and the enigmatic nature of the human experience. The convenience store had once again become a stage for the bizarre and the inexplicable, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary converged in the most unexpected ways. As the night stretched on, Lisa knew that the store would continue to be a source of strange encounters and peculiar moments, a testament to the enduring mysteries of the human soul and the uncharted territories of the human mind. And as she gazed out at the city beyond the store's windows, she couldn't help but wonder what other secrets and surprises the night had in store for her in the world beyond the coolers. Very poor maintenance. In the heart of Philadelphia, a city that pulsed with life both day and night, there existed a gas station that had long fallen into a state of disrepair. Nestled among the bustling streets and the constant hum of traffic, the Getty gas station stood as a forgotten relic of a bygone era. It was a warm summer evening when John, a weary traveler with a rental car in tow, found himself in need of refueling. His GPS had guided him to the nearest gas station, and as he followed the directions, he couldn't help but notice the foreboding sight that awaited him. The Getty gas station appeared on the horizon, its once vibrant signage faded and peeling, a stark contrast to the vivid lights of the city that surrounded it. John's initial impression was one of disbelief as he approached the station. Every single pump stood in a state of disrepair, vandalized and broken, their panels and signs missing or shattered. The parking lot, once a place of convenience and commerce, was now littered with shards of broken glass, glistening ominously in the dim light. The atmosphere hung heavy with an eerie stillness, broken only by the distant sounds of the city's nightlife. As John's rental car came to a halt before the gas station, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease wash over him. The doors of the convenience store, which should have been a place of respite and refreshment, were shuttered tight, their windows cloaked in darkness. Only one lone door remained ajar, a feeble open light flickering above it. John exchanged a glance with his traveling companion, a sense of foreboding settling over them both. Something about the desolation of the gas station, its dilapidated state, and the oppressive silence that enveloped it, sent shivers down their spines. Despite their initial intention to refuel, John made a quick decision. The risk of stopping at this forsaken place far outweighed the need for gas. With a sense of urgency, he maneuvered the rental car past the gas pumps, never once allowing it to come to a halt. The eerie scene disappeared in the rearview mirror as they continued on their way, leaving the Getty gas station behind them. As John and his companion made their way to a different gas station, they couldn't help but reflect on the inexplicable aura of dread that had surrounded the forsaken Getty station. It was as though the very essence of the place had been tainted by the passage of time and neglect, casting a pall of unease over anyone who dared to venture near. The city of Philadelphia continued to buzz with life and activity, its streets teeming with people going about their nightly routines. But in the shadow of the Getty gas station, an unsettling silence reigned, a testament to the power of neglect and the haunting presence of a place long forgotten. In the days that followed, John and his companion never spoke of their encounter with the abandoned gas station. It remained a chilling memory, a reminder that even in the heart of a bustling city, there were places where the forces of neglect and decay held sway, casting a pall over the ordinary and the mundane. And as John returned his rental car and continued on his journey, he couldn't help but wonder about the secrets that lay hidden within the forgotten corners of the city, the places where time had left its mark, and where the echoes of the past still whispered their tales of abandonment and decay. For the Getty gas station, it was a place lost to time, a relic of a bygone era that had faded into obscurity. And for John, it was a chilling reminder that even in the midst of life's vibrancy, there were places where the darkness of neglect could cast a long and haunting shadow. When you are the creepy, in a city somewhere in the United States, on an ordinary night filled with the buzz of city life, a group of friends found themselves on a late-night snack run. The corner store and gas station beckoned with its neon signs and promise of indulgent treats. Little did they know that this seemingly routine outing would take an unexpected turn, and the true source of unease would be one of their own. Among the group of friends sat Mark, who found himself in the back right seat of the car. The night air was cool against his skin as he waited for the car to come to a stop in front of the convenience store. It was his turn to run in and grab the snacks while his friends waited in the car. The car pulled up to the front of the store, and Mark stepped out, eager to satisfy their snack cravings. The friends exchanged casual goodbyes and reassurances that they would wait for him to return. With a quick nod, Mark entered the convenience store, the enticing aroma of snacks and the hum of fluorescent lights filling his senses. Time seemed to slip away as Mark perused the store's offerings, carefully selecting the snacks that his friends had requested. With his arms laden with goodies, he made his way to the checkout counter and completed the transaction. He couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation as he thought about sharing the snacks with his friends during their drive home. Exiting the store, Mark returned to the dimly lit parking lot, the fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow over the scene. But as he approached the car, a feeling of unease settled over him. Something was amiss. Mark pulled open the car door and climbed into the back seat, ready to share the spoils of his snack run. However, as he settled into his seat, he couldn't see his friends in the front of the car. It was as though they had vanished into thin air. Confusion gripped Mark as he looked around the car. Had they decided to play a prank on him? He was about to voice his suspicions when he glanced to his left and froze. Sitting right beside him in the back seat was a little kid, no older than 10, staring at him with wide, curious eyes. It was a moment frozen in time, a tableau of unease and disbelief. Mark was the stranger in the car, and the child was the unexpected passenger. A chill ran down Mark's spine as he tried to make sense of the situation. He had entered what appeared to be the exact same car model and color that had dropped him off at the convenience store just a minute earlier, but it was not his friend's vehicle. Panic threatened to consume him as he imagined the potential consequences of this bizarre mix-up. In that surreal moment, Mark's thoughts raced. Would the child's parents return to find a stranger in their car? How would he explain his presence to them? He imagined an angry father ready to explode with accusations and threats. With his heart pounding, Mark knew he had to act swiftly. He carefully extracted himself from the car, his eyes never leaving the bewildered child. As he stepped out onto the pavement, he spotted his friend's car parked just ahead in a parking spot, their familiar faces looking out at him. Mark rushed over to them, his breath coming in short, anxious gasps. He recounted the surreal experience he had just endured, the disbelief in his friend's eyes matching his own. They listened intently, their expressions a mix of concern and amazement. The friends exchanged theories about how such a bizarre mix-up could have occurred, but no satisfactory explanation emerged. They could only marvel at the sheer improbability of the situation. As they drove away from the convenience store, Mark couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered. The child's bewildered gaze haunted his thoughts, a reminder that sometimes, in the strangest of circumstances, you can become the source of someone else's unease, the unexpected visitor in their world. The night continued, the city's lights and sounds a backdrop to their shared experience. Mark and his friends had ventured into the surreal at night, and they would forever remember the unsettling encounter that had left them questioning the boundaries of reality and the mysteries of the human experience. In the end, Mark and his friends could only speculate about the child and the car mix-up, a story that would become one of their own eerie legends, a reminder that sometimes, when you least expect it, you can find yourself in a situation where you are the creepy one, and the world around you becomes a place of unexpected mysteries and uncharted territories of the mind. Nowhere to go. In the heart of San Antonio, a bustling city teeming with life and culture, a seemingly routine visit to a local garage would soon take an inexplicable and chilling turn for one man. As the sweltering Texan sun beat down on the city streets, John found himself waiting for a complete tire change at the dimly lit garage. Little did he know that the unassuming stranger beside him would unravel a tale so grotesque and macabre that it would haunt his memories for years to come. John was a man of routine, and that fateful day was no different. As he sat in the garage's waiting area, he couldn't help but notice the stranger seated beside him. The man, a rugged figure with weathered skin and a piercing gaze, seemed to take a peculiar interest in John's presence. His eyes fixated on the pipe that John had clutched in his hand, a vice that had since become a habit of the past. It was this shared interest in tobacco that led to an unsettling exchange between the two men. The stranger reached into the depths of a tobacco pouch, an action that initially appeared innocent enough. But as he unzipped the pouch and held it out for John to see, an inexplicable feeling of dread crept over John. "Check what I keep in there," the stranger whispered, his voice laced with an eerie calmness. With a sense of trepidation, John leaned in closer and peered into the open pouch. What he found there would forever haunt his nightmares: a severed human finger, its pallid skin and gnarled nail grotesquely juxtaposed against the backdrop of the tobacco pouch. Shock and horror washed over John as he recoiled from the sight. He couldn't comprehend the gruesome tableau that lay before him. Questions raced through his mind, but his voice failed him. How had this man come into possession of such a gruesome souvenir? And why had he chosen to share it with a complete stranger in a dimly lit garage? The stranger, however, showed no signs of remorse or unease. Instead, he leaned in closer, a faint grin playing at the corners of his lips. "I was an interrogator for the army," he explained, his voice devoid of emotion, as if recounting a mundane story. "I took it as a souvenir in South America. John's heart pounded in his chest as he sat beside this enigmatic and unsettling figure. He was now trapped in a surreal and nightmarish scenario, with nowhere to go. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity as he struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy. The garage's ambient noises, the clatter of tools, the muffled voices of mechanics at work, served as a haunting backdrop to the chilling exchange between the two men. John couldn't tear his gaze away from the severed finger, a silent witness to the horrors of war and the darkness that could reside within the human soul. As the minutes stretched on, John couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom that hung in the air. The stranger's presence, his calm demeanor, and the grotesque souvenir he had shared all combined to create an atmosphere of profound unease. John couldn't escape the realization that he was sitting beside a psychopath, a man who had crossed boundaries of morality that few could comprehend. And so, he continued to sit beside the stranger, pretending that everything was normal, concealing his mounting fear and anxiety. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city of San Antonio, John couldn't help but wonder about the depths of darkness that could exist in the world. The tire change was completed, and John finally had an opportunity to escape the oppressive atmosphere that had enveloped him. With a curt nod and a quick goodbye, he left the garage, leaving the stranger behind, his chilling story and the severed finger forever etched into John's memory. As he drove away from the garage, John couldn't shake the feeling that he had narrowly escaped a fate too gruesome to contemplate. The city lights of San Antonio flickered in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped him in that dimly lit garage. The encounter with the enigmatic stranger would forever haunt John's memories, a stark reminder that in the most unexpected of places and moments, one could find themselves in the company of darkness, with nowhere to go and no escape from the chilling depths of the human psyche. The Getaway Car. It was the dead of winter, and 5 friends from Ontario, Canada, were embarking on a road trip of a lifetime to sunny Florida for a New Year's celebration they would never forget. The drive was long and grueling, stretching for over 21 hours straight, as they ventured deep into the heart of the United States. It was an adventure filled with laughter, music, and the anticipation of a memorable holiday. However, as the hours passed and the miles melted away, the road seemed to stretch into eternity, and exhaustion began to take its toll on the travelers. They found themselves in rural West Virginia, surrounded by dense forests and winding roads that seemed to go on forever. It was around 2:30 in the morning when their luck took a treacherous turn. Their SUV, laden with luggage and dreams of fun in the sun, sputtered to a halt on the side of a desolate road. Panic washed over the group as they realized they had run out of gas in the middle of nowhere. With nothing but darkness surrounding them, they coasted to a stop at a grim and shadowy gas station that appeared to have been plucked straight from a horror movie. Not a soul was in sight as they pulled up to the gas pumps. The gas station stood in eerie silence, its flickering lights casting unsettling shadows that danced in the frigid night air. The friends exchanged nervous glances, sensing that something was amiss. The man behind the counter, a weathered and stern figure, peered at them through the grimy window, his eyes filled with a sense of urgency. With a voice as cold as the winter wind, he barked at them, "Put $5 in the car and get the hell out of here." The warning in his words sent shivers down their spines, but the urgency of their situation left them with no choice but to comply. As they began filling the tank with the little money they had left, a sense of foreboding settled over them. They couldn't help but wonder why the gas station attendant was so eager to get rid of them, and why he seemed to be looking over his shoulder. Their questions were soon answered in the most terrifying way possible. From the depths of the surrounding darkness, 3 ominous figures emerged, their presence cloaked in shadows. Each one held a gun, their glinting metal barrels reflecting the dim light of the gas station. Panic seized the group as the armed men began to advance toward their vulnerable vehicle. The friends had no intention of finding out what these strangers wanted from them. Fear and survival instincts kicked in, and as soon as they had enough gas to escape, they left the gas station behind in a cloud of dust. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they sped down the desolate road, their headlights piercing the impenetrable darkness. 15 to 20 minutes later, they finally reached a small town, its streets bathed in the warm glow of well-lit gas station signs. The tension that had gripped them since the encounter at the desolate station began to ease as they pulled into the welcoming embrace of the brightly lit pumps. Here, they felt safe and relieved, the fear of the past hours slowly fading into the rearview mirror. With shaky hands, they completed filling the tank, determined to put as much distance between themselves and that nightmarish gas station as possible. As they continued their journey toward Florida, the events of that harrowing night would linger in their minds, a chilling reminder that the road could take them to unexpected and perilous places. The memory of the shadowy figures emerging from the darkness and the cryptic warning of the gas station attendant would stay with them throughout their journey, serving as a stark reminder that sometimes, on the open road, one's closest brush with danger might be lurking just around the next bend.